Okay. Well, first thing, we're here together, an hour or so, sitting here. We're going to chat about something. And the reason we're doing it is advice coming from the Buddha, coming from the Buddhist approach to life, advice. We mightn't take it, but it is advice. Think of it like that. It's to help us develop our amazing potential. Buddha's got this extraordinary view of what our potential is as human beings, you know, which I think is very empowering in our sad, depressed, hopeless, self-hating culture. So we're going to listen, think about, contemplate, analyze, internalize maybe this information, a bit of it, 1% even is good enough, so that we can develop our potential, and so we can then, of course, because we live in this crazy world together, be of use to others. So I think it's something interesting as approach. We can sort of see it, but it's good to articulate it. I like to articulate it in the Buddhist approach, the Buddhist way of saying it. The Buddhist view of the mind, as we might know, you know, is very clear, very, very clear in distinguishing in here between the so-called neurotic, unhappy, deluded, kind of ego-based, I-based, fear-based states of mind. We mightn't necessarily think of them like that, but when we look at it, we'll see that they are, which for the Buddha are the complete source of our suffering, to make us utterly miserable, and therefore cause us to harm others, you know. And then the other states of mind, completely different, but they all mix together like in a big soup, so we can't tell the difference initially. The good ones, the virtuous ones, the positive ones. And so we know the first lot, anger, depression, jealousy, low self-esteem, they're so simple. And we know the second lot, love and compassion, wisdom and kindness and self-confidence. We know these words. So in our modern psychology, I've got a feeling, we don't talk so simply. We make it more complicated. We talk about, we have these states of being, these kind of these negative ones anyway, called OCD and ADHD and stress this and that and blah, all these complicated names, often in Greek. I always make sarcastic jokes about that, you know. Yeah, I remember somebody made a joke and said that, you know, because we love to put Greek names to everything, and so pedophilia makes it sound important. But actually, it's an awful thing to be as a pedophile, but give it the same status as being a psychologist or because it's got a fancy Greek name, you know. Give it a Greek name. It's so absurd. That's a good point. I don't know why we love to put everything in Greek. I don't know why. It makes it more important, maybe. Isn't it? It's so fascinating. I find it so fascinating. Completely. Or we put them in letters, you know, ADHD or OCD or all these states of being, these kind of. But the Buddhist view is almost like deceptively simple. We all know these words: love, hate, anger, compassion. Well, we're good little Christians. We all knew about the 7 deadly sins. I mean, it's the same, you know. So this is the stuff of Buddhist psychology. It's not complicated. And almost because of that, almost seems a bit simplistic to us. Oh yeah, you know. So I'm a Buddhist and I've got attachment with my God. Then I have serious personality disorders, so I go to a therapist, you know. As if Buddha's not talking about personality disorders. That's what he's talking about. It's our fancy name for it. So let's look at these states of mind and see how they are what we think of as personality disorders, or, you know, we have all these terms we use. Buddha's expertise is this stuff, you know. What I want to make is to see how evident it is that these unhappy ones are what causes pain. And it seems so evident, but it's not evident to us because we're so addicted to saying, yes, I'm angry and yes, I'm depressed. But that's the reason out there. We're so used to that. So we kind of we're seeing ourselves as a victim of these circumstances. That's how I think we see our suffering. We know we're depressed, we know we're angry, we know we're jealous, we know we're anxious. But our because is something out there. So, and that's the very way we talk about it. It's like as if we're a victim of these external circumstances, and victim means it's not fair, you know. I'm not being mean about it, but I think that's how we feel. So what Buddha's saying is so simple, we miss it. And it's extreme. Actually, the words are so simple, but to actually apply this is unbelievably difficult, you know, because of that instinct or that impulse of separating ourselves from the cause and feeling that we're the victim of that cause, and it's done to us. It's done to us, you know. But the Buddha's approach is that it's the very states of mind themselves that are the cause of the pain. And that's too hard for us to bear, because then we think, oh, you mean it's my fault. That's how we hear it. Because the ego has to be an innocent victim. I'm sorry to be so cruel, but if we analyze our experiences, that's how we think. And it's like a real interpretation we give, you know. It's not my fault. Or if someone says, look at the anger, how it's hurting you, we'll say, but I'm allowed to be angry. Look what happened, you know. That's how we talk. No one teaches us this. So it's really, the Buddha's view is simple enough, but it's hard to apply it because we've got to get past those obstacles in our mind, those interpretations. It feels like it's blame. Oh, you mean it's my fault? That's too hard for us to bear, you know. So it takes a while to hear these deceptively simple words. All Buddha's saying is suffering comes from these states of mind. And the other thing about these states of mind, which is so evident if we think about it, is that it's what cuts us off from others. It's what cuts us off from others. The more we're caught up in anger, depression, anxiety, and jealousy, the more disconnected we are from others, you know. So no wonder we're lonely. And even let's talk about loneliness. I mean, loneliness is something, they say it's one of the worst kind of sufferings in the world, you know, people being lonely. And the Buddha's analysis of it is so shocking, it's hard to hear it. And the way to understand the Buddha's analysis of it is to understand attachment. This word is so common. I mean, for the Buddha, in his Four Noble Truths, the teaching he first gave after he got enlightened way back, you know, in Bodh Gaya under the tree or something. And he started to teach. He went to Bodh Gaya, he walked, you know, he walked everywhere in northern India, walked around for 50 years teaching. And he walked to Varanasi, where he'd learned and studied in the past before he became a Buddha. And he taught his old students, you know. And his first teaching was this concept of they call it the Four Noble Truths, you know. It's the very first presentation of Buddha's teachings. So I think the truths aren't noble. They call them the Four Noble Truths. I think it's the Four Truths for the noble ones. And noble one is a term that's used to refer to anybody who's realized this, you know, who's done the work. So the Four Truths for the noble ones. So there is suffering, that's the first one. There are causes of it. You can get rid of that suffering and the causes. And then the fourth one is the methodology. And it's sort of deceptively simple, you know. And it's very obvious. If you've got a problem, obviously you have a problem, you want a solution. But it seems to me until you've established the cause of a problem, you will never find a solution. That's pretty evident, I think. So Buddha's got his very own, very seemingly simple, or can be put simply, presentation of this. And the third one is the key. There is the potential, there is the possibility of being free of suffering and its causes. And then the fourth is how to do it. So of course, if that's true, we better know what suffering is, isn't it? But get our definitions clear. And this part's quite difficult because he states three different levels of suffering. The first one is the only thing that we mean by suffering, which is, he calls it the suffering of suffering, like in-your-face suffering. Which is effectively when the bad things happen. It's the simplest way of putting it. It's when the bad things happen. And that we all agree. That is no question. Dogs and ants and monkeys as well. Everybody, that's what we mean by suffering, is when the bad things happen. And it's pretty clear. But when it comes to compassion, when we really go beyond the Four Noble Truths and get to start to see others, you know, all in the same boat, this is hard to see, because the only way we have compassion, the only group of people we have compassion for are those who are having the suffering of suffering, are those who are experiencing bad things, but they've got to be innocent victims. So horrible people, you know, the warmongers can be also having suffering, but we don't have compassion for them because they're naughty. So we've got to have innocent victims who are having bad things done to them, basically. They're the ones we have compassion for. So it's rather limited, you know, because the Buddha is telling us, his view, his observation, and it's quite subtle, is that this is the gross level of suffering. The subtler one is harder to see for us, because, and it's very shocking. Let's talk about that one. It's very shocking. Because what he means by the second kind of suffering, and he calls it simply the suffering of change, He calls it the suffering of change. But it's really, no, I want to see you all. Move your chairs around or something. Move over, Martin, or something. I want to see you. Is that your friend?
Yes.
Oh, good. Hello. Hello. Hang on. I've got to see you. Hello, sweetheart. Welcome. Just driven for an hour or something, isn't it? An hour? You drove for an hour or half an hour? More.
I took trains.
What?
Trains. I took trains in subway.
Well, like a couple of hours.
Oh, you took the subway. You didn't take the car. You didn't drive. Oh my God, 2 hours. Well, welcome. Okay, good. Okay, so yeah, Martin he's Swedish. He used to run the centre in Stockholm for years, and now he lives in Australia. He's become an Australian. He's migrated and become an Australian. That's how Australians talk. Okay.
Well said.
That's right. There you go. I know. So okay, so here's Buddha's view. Buddha's essential view is that okay, his view is that we've all got this potential to be free of suffering. I mean, it sounds so simple, it sounds so silly almost, to be free of suffering and to be happy. So another way to put it is to be happy, you know. So then we better know what suffering means, we better know what happiness means. Okay. So I'll just keep it simple. Okay. Yeah, so let's go back to the mind. I think we'll stick to that one. We'll stick to what I was saying before. So the Buddha's expertise, I would say the Buddha's expertise is the mind, which might be surprising to us because we think of it as religion. So we don't think of the mind. We never say the word mind. We think of religion. We think of the word soul or spirit or something like that, isn't it? You know, I was born a Catholic, and so I talked about a soul, a special component that you get from a creator, get from God, but not like in Buddhism, not like that. Buddha doesn't have a view of creator, no concept. Don't need creating, is a way of putting it, you know, because his view about the mind is really quite a unique view to him. So let's just remind ourselves of that. So what's our mind? Because the Buddha is telling us that our mind has unbelievable potential. So we know that in modern psychology, we know what potential to be geniuses and intellectual and musicians and artists. And we never talk in our culture, and I think it's very true, that we don't talk about the potential to be happy. We don't talk about the potential to be free of suffering, which is a kind of a bit of a depressing way of framing it, freedom from suffering. Why not say full of happiness? But it refers to the same thing. So this is why I mentioned the Four Noble Truths. Buddha's first teaching is how it's all framed in terms of there is suffering, there are causes, you can be free of it, and then how to do it. So flip it over, and it means learn to be happy. So that means what? That means what? You know, it means what? So the Buddha's deal is all in it's the mind. The mind is the key thing. The mind is what his expertise is, I would say. So that means we need to know what he means by the mind, because it's not the same as we think in modern psychology. I mean, these days, a lot of neuroscience is if you like, verifying some of the things the Buddha's been telling us for 2,500 years, which makes Western people happy. Like, now we prove the Buddha's right, you know. I mean, he doesn't need us to prove him right, but it's helpful if we can. For example, you know, I remember one scientist saying that the greatest finding of the 20th century is neuroplasticity, that we're not stuck with the brain we're born with. Well, I mean, this is the absolute fundamental point in all of Buddha's teachings, that our mind is infinitely flexible. But of course, his view of the mind is not that it's the brain. And this is where it's a bit shocking initially. He's not arguing we don't have a brain. Clearly we have a brain. But I always like to put it this way, the way of saying what the brain is without insulting neuroscientists, the brain is the physical, what goes on in the brain is a physical indicator of what's happening in the mind. So for the Buddha, it's much more internal, it's much more subjective, it's the actual cognitive process itself, the very having of thoughts and feelings and emotions. We can go on about the brain, but if you don't ever know anything about your brain, it doesn't mean you can't change your mind. I mean, you know, if you get all excited about, say, neuroplasticity, or the way we talk these days, you can, what's the word they use? What's the verb? New neural pathways. What's the verb? Carve new neural pathways. What do they say? Develop new neural pathways in your brain, right? But if you analyze what does that, you don't get a knife and carve a neural pathway. You think different thoughts. Do you understand, isn't it? But some people don't care about the thinking and thoughts, but it's the brain that gets them excited. That's great. But your thoughts are what does it. Now, for example, I remember There's one monk, remember this French monk? Thank you, Mathieu Ricard. His brain, where he stuck wires on his brain, and all he was doing was thinking about compassion, nothing was serious. And they could see that that thinking reconfigured his brain. And that's really all Buddha's. So Buddha's expertise isn't the brain. The Buddha's expertise is the thinking. And that's the Dhamma that does the job, you know. You don't have to go into your brain to change it. You think thoughts. So it's kind of simple, you know, it's extraordinary. But we have to look at how we, even if we don't know about neuroplasticity, don't know about a brain, we all know we don't think we can change our thoughts. Part of our enormous suffering, isn't it, is that we really do feel we are set in stone. And some of the main pain we experience, forget about the gross level of suffering, forget about being poor or sick, but look at the mental one, and that's really the Buddha's expertise. Look at the ordinary anxiety and ordinary sadness and ordinary jealousy and ordinary anxiety that ordinary people have, you know, living in hell in their minds, you know. So it's so clear, we can see this. You can be rich and beautiful and still be utterly miserable. We somehow know that, but we've got to understand it. So the Buddha's expertise is how to change the mind, you know, that's it. It's really not complicated. And don't call it, oh, you know, spiritual. It's called Buddhist spiritual practice is Buddhist psychology. No contradiction, because he uses the word mind. He doesn't posit a separate thing called a soul or something, you know, something mysterious, not like that. And so these techniques that Buddha's got, like I always like to say, quoting His Holiness the Dalai Lama, these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago, they're the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. Surprisingly to us, because we thought it was Freud. I mean, we're so arrogant in our culture, you know. But these incredible Indians, geniuses, well before the Buddha, they're the ones who created this brilliant technique, a psychological skill. It's called meditation. Don't mystify it. It's a psychological skill that enables a person, and it's intense hard work, to literally learn to calm and subdue the grosser level of our cognitive process, which is conceptuality, and the sensory, which is all we posit as existing in modern science, to completely subdue those, to go beyond those, not to sink into some kind of oblivion, but to go to more subtle levels of our own capacity for cognition. This does not exist in neuroscience, you know. It does not exist in neuroscience or the modern view of the mind or modern psychology. So it's incredible. And this has been around for 3,000 years. It's kind of humbling to think. It's all there, these techniques. But it's only really now in our culture we're starting to hear about this and give credibility to these people, you know. But we mystify because it's religion, isn't it? We put it up in the sky somewhere. No, it's incredibly sophisticated psychology, and that's not joking, you know. So our mind is far more subtle. The Buddhist view is our mind is far more subtle. See, like I said, it's a subjective cognitive process itself. It's our capacity for thought, feelings, emotions, unconscious, subconscious. Yeah, the body plays a role. We're not discussing that though. We're looking, and that's Buddha's expertise, not to look at the brain, but to look directly at the actual cognitive process itself. And that's the job of being a Buddhist. As Lama Yeshe puts it so beautifully, being your own therapist, being your own psychologist. And that's why you've got to have some concentration. I mean, we all, you know, we know if we know Buddhist teachings, there are two main modes of meditation, modes of using your mind. Thousands of techniques, two main modes. One is the first one, which is the concentration technique. It's learning, and in a way, that's just training. Massive benefits come from just that. But it's basically it's training. You're honing your mind to be this amazing, clear, precise, you know, capacity for cognition, focused, calmer, subtle, more focused. So that, and the benefits of it are marvelous. But its only purpose, from the Buddhist perspective, is to go into the second mode of meditation, to learn where you utilize that skillful concentration to become super familiar with the workings of your own thoughts and feelings and emotions, and to unpack and unravel them in a very crystal clear way in order to understand them, and that means crucially in Buddhist psychology to distinguish between the neuroses and the virtues, because this is one of the fundamental points in Buddhist psychology. When you look at the Buddhist model of the mind, when you study the text and look at the Buddhist model of the mind, this is deceptively simple, but amazing. that he makes this utter distinction between the neurotic, I-based, fear-based, unhappy states of mind. We all know them. Anxiety, depression, jealousy, low self-esteem, and the positive ones, the virtuous ones, our saving grace, love, compassion, kindness, self-confidence, generosity, forgiveness, these positive states of mind. Well, okay, Buddhism uses terms like virtue and non-virtue, and we don't like that in psychology. It sounds like judgment. But here very clearly, you know. So, of course, our big problem in the West, when we hear this, it's all very nice. We hear that we've got anger, jealousy, depression, love, compassion, kindness. And we know that, but we give them equal status in our culture. We give them equal status. And this is the point that's so radical in Buddhism. Don't hear this as religion. This is Buddhist psychology. Buddhist working with the mind. Buddha's observation is, and he's not a creator, he's not making this up, it's not from revelation, it's from his own direct experience. And anybody who's followed his methodology from their direct experience, that there's this crucial distinction between the neurotic, deluded, unhappy, painful states of mind and the positive ones. The negative neurotic ones causes pain and suffering and causes to harm others. The positive ones causes happiness and causes to help others and to be closer to others. And then he's found that the negative ones, guess what? Neuroplasticity, are not at the core of our being, are not set in stone. And this is where it's more radical than neuroplasticity. Buddha's view is that not only can we lessen the neuroses, he has found from his own direct experience that we can rid our mind of them totally. Now that's kind of shocking. Like I say, you go to a neuroscientist and you say, please give me methods to get rid of all ego, all fears, all anger, all jealousy, all depression, and he'll think you're mentally ill because he thinks you're suggesting you cut half your brain out. So we don't have that view in our culture. So it's very shocking to hear it. But because we put it in religious terms, because see, that's the meaning of the word nirvana. You've achieved your nirvana when, honey, you've removed the rubbish from your mind. So that's why that's religion, some other fancy place in the sky, you know. No, we're dealing with the mind. Nirvana is a state of mind. It's a term used to refer to the cessation of this suffering and its causes, which is in your mind. So it's very kind of practical. We always mystify it, you know. But it's shocking to hear. It's shocking to hear because we naturally think that we don't need a psychologist or a neuroscientist to tell us that they are part of a normal person. We believe that I'm a normal person. I've got anger, jealousy, and depression. Everybody's like this. This is who I am. And not only do we believe it spontaneously, but we give them this is a terrible irony of ego. We give them way more power than the positive states, isn't it? You know, anger can arise in your mind. It fills your whole mind. And you just totally identify with it, define yourself as an angry person. This is me, this is who I am, and then we believe in it. We read this story, you know. And then 27 people can tell you that you're really not that angry or being. It's okay, you've got a few good qualities. We don't believe it. We don't believe it. We somehow are very addicted. The irony is we're very addicted to our misery. And it's not trying to be mean. We're addicted to believing that this is who I am and that these are real and solid and can't be changed. This is my nature. It's like instinctively we're believing these are at the core of our being. So to hear the Buddha's view from his own observation that they're not at the core of our being, not only can be lessened, but can be utterly eradicated. It's a pretty radical concept. And initially it's too shocking. I mean, it's absurd. We can't even imagine a person who's only got virtue and goodness and compassion. We think they'd be a demented kind of weird person. We can't even imagine it. So it's not surprising we can't hear what he's saying, you know. So if it's true, forget getting rid of, just forget that. If it's true that they don't define us, if it's true that they're not in the core of our being and not our real nature, and if it's true we can even lessen them slightly, then we've got to see the advantage to that, to ourselves, and we've got to see what he means by that. What is anger? If I can lessen anger, I better know what it is. If I can grow love and kindness, I better know how to define them. And that's the point. In Buddhist psychology, they're distinctly different, you know. And that's the thing about Buddhist psychology as well. It doesn't deal with kind of, like I was saying before, in the West, we talk about very generalized kind of, I don't even know the word. What's the word they use? Pathology? What's the word? Pathologies, maybe? What's a pathology? Anybody can tell me the word of pathology? Nobody.
Like a sickness,
What?
pathology would be like a
Okay, a
sickness,
problem, a
neurosis,
sickness, physical or mental?
mental. No.
Mental only. No,
No, well,
no, it's physical, really, for sure. So then all our mental illnesses we've got pathologies, isn't it? And so we're talking about very general terms, you know, and they're usually to do with other people and certainly to do with the body. And it's a very kind of, but whereas the Buddhist view is almost deceptively simple, he's dealing with very precisely individual states of mind, individual. And what he means by that is thoughts. And this is very surprising to us. So anger or jealousy or attachment. 3 examples, you know, of simple words we all know. The Buddhist approach is, and we learn to know our mind using this concentration technique that Buddha taught that helps us stay focused. And then we learn that, you know, the view of the mind, have to have the theories clear, because it's a very distinct view. It's not like Jung's or Freud's, it's Buddha's own one. We learn the theory, and then with introspection, using clear concentration, you can begin to identify in your own mind all these crazy thoughts. I mean, we know our head is full of crazy thoughts all day. From the second we wake up in the morning, we know it's just natural to have uncontrolled thoughts. But we know, and this is our tragedy in the West, we don't pay attention to them until they're shouting. Meaning, until the body feels them. And this is our problem. This is our problem. That's why we refer to them as feelings, isn't it? Emotions. When you're intensely angry, your body's shaking. When you're deeply depressed, you are inert in bed and can't move. We feel, and the pain of jealousy, isn't it? The pain of grief, the pain of anger in the mind, it's like a physical experience as well, isn't it? And that's reasonable because the body and the mind are intimately connected. But the point is, our trouble in our culture, we only notice the pain when it's completely full blown. And I know it's a dumb analogy, but I use it and I think it's a good one. That's like driving a car all these years and you never have heard of mechanics. You've never heard of checking the oil and checking the petrol and checking the wheels. Never heard of it. You drive it until you're on the freeway at 100 miles an hour and oh, my wheels are falling off, and you're a bit surprised, you know. That's when we notice our emotions. It's only when the wheels fall off. But we know, and that's a really good point, we know nobody's wheels ever fall off because you go to mechanics. It's a really simple point. So if we could pay attention to the wobbles and the wheels, the wobbles in here, and this is a really good point, before it gets to the level of emotion, we could all be incredibly sane, reasonable, intelligent people navigating our lives beautifully. And that, forget nirvana, this is what Buddha is saying. We can do that. We can do that because it's totally internal. We have to learn to pay attention to what the hell is happening in these crazy thoughts, unpack and unravel, edit them, sort them out. It's like there's total chaos in here. Like James Joyce novel, you know, totally inarticulate rubbish, and people even make it all fancy in literature, like unpunctuated crazy thoughts, as if it's something special about a stupid mind, you know. I can't believe people think it's literature. I'm so shocked. Can't believe it. You understand? Because it's got no punctuation. So it's meant to be special because all this free thinking. I mean, it's just a berserk, uncontrolled mind. But we think it's so normal to have an uncontrolled mind, don't we? Buddha's got these techniques that we can control them. Have effortless control over every thought in your mind. Can you even imagine that? It's inconceivable to us. But that's what we can do. And what's the advantage to us? You don't lose the plot. So then we think, well, you're just going to be unemotional, you just be like cold. You know? No, you'll be in control of what the hell is going on in your mind. So you'll never have the wheels fall off. This is really true. Forget achieving nirvana. Forget achieving Buddhahood, you know. If we could just have confidence in this, it'd be who would not want to learn to know what the hell is happening in their mind. But you've got to get over the obstacle also, not only the obstacle of waiting too late for the wheels to fall off. Like the commonest thing is people say, I'm in the middle of a fight with my boyfriend, what'll I do? That's the wheels falling off. Damage control is the best you can expect. But if you had a practice every day and you understood what anger is, you understood what jealousy is, and you heard the conceptual stories, and you then can pay attention throughout the day, not on your cushion, but throughout the day, you learn to use this introspective tool called focus to notice what the hell is happening in your mind. deeper down as conceptual stories before it hits the body and becomes emotional. That's the skill that Buddha gives us. And if we can do this, we become amazing human beings, I promise. So the other obstacle to get over is the wish to even do this, because we'd rather blame everybody else. What do you mean I should change my anger? It's Martin's fault. That's very strongly how we feel. And in fact, we so strongly give all the power to the outside world. We blame the outside world for what goes on in our mind, that we can't even hear what's going on in our mind because we're so addicted to our own misconception that it's the outside world that's the problem. So there are problems in the outside world. It's not contradicted. Martin might have been a creep to me. He might have been mean to me. You saw it. That's not the discussion here. This is what's hard. We feel I'm justified in being depressed or angry or jealous because ego has to get itself off the hook, you know. It's not my fault. Look what Martin did to me, we'll say, as if somehow, look, I'm allowed to be angry. That's the part that's really hard for us to get over because we take it as blame, and we take it as blame, you know. That's why I always use the example of my friends in prison. I mean, I can't get better examples. Their backs are against the wall. They have no choice, you know. There's no point in blaming somebody for putting you in prison for the wrong reason if you can't get out, sitting there screaming and yelling and going completely out of your brain. When you realize, yes, it might be unfair. Yes, Martin was a creep. But this is the part that's hard. But what can I do about my mind? There's a saying in Buddhism, if you can change something, please change it. What if you can't, you know? And that's often our struggle. So, you know, it's like sometimes my friends in prison, I so admire them because they don't have a choice. They only have one choice, change their mind, or they go crazy, one or the other. You can't get out. You can't get off death row. You can't just walk out, you know. So you've got one choice, change your mind. We've got two choices, but we don't even know we've got either. So you might be having, you know, I go to Martin complaining about my lousy job, you know, mean boss, horrible colleagues. And he says, well, you know, you could leave. And I'm shocked. What do you mean leave? No, I couldn't get another job. Not possible. No. Why should I leave? It's not my fault. And then he says, well, you know, Robina, if you can't leave, you could change your mind about it and try and say some good things about the job. No, not possible. It's a disgusting job. Are we recognizing this is how it's like, it's almost embarrassing how, I mean, it's hard. We can't make the decision to leave and we can't make the decision to change our mind. So that's why we suffer immensely, unbelievably, going mad. So it's really hard just to get to the point of even recognizing that there's an advantage to you to change your mind. It means to reconfigure your interpretation of something. That's what it means, change your mind. You've got to first notice the interpretation. And anger is an interpretation. Jealousy is an interpretation. Anxiety is an interpretation. Depression is an interpretation. And that's not kidding you. So we've got these very ingrained, very deeply believed in established philosophies in our head already. We don't think we have, but you can recognize what I'm saying. And they're the philosophy, I'm sorry to be rude, but they're the philosophy of an innocent victim. Or it's not to whom good things and bad things are done. In a sense, with this approach, you know, we feel the world is kind of done to us, good things as well. We kind of blame Martin for making you miserable, but you also blame him for making you happy. Because we depend upon him to make me happy, and we blame him for making us unhappy. So all of this I'm talking about without giving the word to it, this is a function of attachment. Buddha's view of attachment. This simple word that we don't even have an analysis of like this. We do have in our culture. We have 17 different states of mind that all come to the same thing. So to understand Buddhism, you've got to understand attachment. Without understanding attachment, you can't understand Buddha. It's very simple. And you can't understand his approach to why we suffer, and therefore his approach to how to stop suffering. You can't, not possible. You have to understand attachment, which means you have to understand his model, which distinguishes between the neuroses and the positive ones. We kind of know that intuitively. When you meet a person who's kind and loving and patient, you can see that they're happy, and you can see they make you happy. When you meet a person who's anxious, depressed, or jealous, you can see they're miserable and they make you miserable. It's so evident, you know. So this is proving Buddha's point, that neuroses make us miserable and cause us to harm others, and virtues make us happy and cause us to help others. We've got to train in that. It's training, you know. That means we've got to distinguish the neuroses from the virtues. That means we've got to distinguish what and so the main ones, and we all know if you read any Buddhist book at all, you're going to read about the 3 poisons. This cute phrase, the 3 poisons, you know. So the Buddhist model of the mind is very clear. They even always talk about, you can hear it, the Lamas will talk about there are 84,000, isn't it? 84,000 neurotic states of mind. And Buddha has 84,000 solutions, you know. And I ask the Geshis, please tell me what text these are in, and they always say you will never find it. But they always quote Buddha as saying 84,000, but they can never find, I want to see the map, you know, there's be a map there somewhere. And Ling Rinpoche recently always says, 21,000 of those 84,000 are rooted in the first of the 3 poisons, ignorance, ego grasping, this primordial grasping at an inherent, separate, neurotic, unhappy, lonely, bereft me. And then the other 21,000 are rooted in the second one, which is called attachment. And then the other 21,000 are rooted in the third one, which is called aversion. And the final 21,000 are rooted in all 3. So it's a very coherent, kind of psychologically connected map, you know. But even understanding these 3, I promise you, if you begin to understand even the second 2, attachment and aversion, I promise you can have a profound understanding of your own mind and of other people's. Because all the others are rooted in these, you see. So it's a very interesting model, and it's very precise. So what is attachment and what is aversion? Or anger? It's a grosser level of it, isn't it? So attachment for the Buddha runs the show. Effectively, for his Four Noble Truths, this is the main source of suffering. Forget ego grasping, forget the root one. Effectively in daily life, attachment. So we'd better know what he means by it, because this is not the way we use the word in our culture. We use it as a positive state of mind, referring to bonding with somebody, and that's fine. But we all know the same words have different meanings, you know. So this word the Buddha uses is not referring to that. It's referring to a very neurotic, totally I-based, totally fear-based, painful, distressing state of mind. And it's multifaceted. So the first main energy of it, and of course for the Buddha, this is meaning coming from the past, we come into this life programmed with it. It's the consequence of attachment, and what it's a suffering. It's an aspect of attachment, but it's also the concept of practicing attachment, and I'll explain. But this primordial, this deepest one, is this primordial feeling of I haven't got enough. It's dissatisfaction. I mean, it's going to be primordially painful dissatisfaction, you know. No matter what you get, it just by definition is not enough. There's always this aching feeling that I don't have enough. And whatever I get is not enough. How much food I get is not enough. How much money I get is not enough. How much my husband tells me he loves me, it's not enough. How much I lose weight, it's not enough. How much I change the shape of my nose, it's not enough. Always by default, it's dissatisfaction. It's beyond pain. We all recognize it, you know. So because then when you're dissatisfied, of course something's missing, isn't it? You're dissatisfied, means something's missing. So then the next level of attachment is this hankering, this yearning, this hankering, this hunger, emotional hunger for something. And the first level is always just out there, such that when I get it, it'll make the suffering go away. It'll bring satisfaction. It'll calm the dissatisfaction down. So the obvious one is the object of the senses. And for most of us, food. I don't think I've met a person who's not attached to food. And one of the signs of attachment, you think about the object when it's not there. And just recently hearing about people losing weight. I mean, we know it's the biggest one we all got. Want to lose weight because we're not satisfied with the shape of our body. And the biggest suffering, we don't label it like this in the West. We just label it as chatter in the head. I remember watching Oprah because she's now discovered that $1,000 a month drug that's for diabetes but helps you lose weight, right? Mm-hmm. And other people who are on it. And they all say it stops the chatter in the head. Because we all see with food. You know, you think about it when you get up, you think about what you're going to have, then you finish your breakfast, you think about going to have lunch, then you think about it, and so thinking about something when it's not there, that's a sign of this very gross attachment. But so look at people who've got attachment to, say, jumping on girls all day, you know. I'm not being rude, I'm not being judgmental. Thinking about sex, thinking about your video games. I've got a friend who's addicted to video games 5 hours a day, you know. So when he's not there, he's thinking about them. That's a sign of attachment. We all know that one. So thinking about what you haven't got, thinking about what you'd like. So there's the dissatisfaction, emotional hunger for that thing, then trying to work out what it is, and then once you think about what it is you want to get, then the controlling, because attachment's a control freak. Attachment has to get that. And then the next function of attachment is anticipation and excitement, and that's a nice part of attachment. You anticipate the cake. And the next part of attachment is then possessing, if it's people and things. But the tragedy, all this leads to getting the object, the anticipating of the pleasure that will come, the satisfaction. And then what happens is, when you get the cake in the mouth finally, which was the point of the exercise from the start, you get the cake in the mouth, and the attachment's now got to the point where it's so excited, waiting for the happiness to come, the feeling of pleasure, which it will come. But what happens is attachment's waiting for it, it now shifts to dissatisfaction again. No, that's not enough, Robina, you have to have more. So attachment then gets disappointed, and then attachment's thinking, well, the next mouthful will bring the satisfaction. So then you put the second mouthful in, and it triggers pleasure, but you already know the pleasure is not quite as nice as the first mouthful. But attachment's still not satisfied. It says, more cake, please. So attachment, you have another one, and you have another, and as you're doing more anticipating, more disappointment, and more begging to have another mouthful, and the pleasure goes down and down until you get to the fifth piece, and you're going to vomit, so you have to stop. I think we recognize this. This is how we get pleasure in our lives, Buddha says, and it's a very unfortunate, really gross way of, and it just, all it does is increase dissatisfaction. So this is the point this alone is a very fascinating point. That it's central to the Buddhist psychological model. But in the beginning, it sounds kind of boring, you know. So we've got, we have sensory consciousness, and then we have mental consciousness. It's very clear in Buddhist psychology. This is very clear. Sensory is obviously to do with the body. Eye consciousness, the part of your mind that functions through the medium of the eyeball, the part of your ear consciousness, your mind consciousness connected to the ear and the drum and the bits and pieces, tactile consciousness, tongue consciousness, nose consciousness, the five sense consciousnesses. Consciousness is not physical. They work with the body. This is the grossest level. This is the level at which we greet the world. This is the level we hunger at. This is the level we think where happiness is out in the world, out there in the five sense objects. So we spend all our time trying to satisfy get satisfaction through our senses. But the clear point is, and this is not moralistic, it's a fact. It's obvious. The feeling of satisfaction, which will be joy, doesn't come from eating cake. Because you've got to keep having more. If it did come after the first mouthful, you'd be completely blissful and you wouldn't want more cake. You'd be happy, but we're not satisfied with it. So first you're not satisfied, something's missing. You get the cake, and then when you get the cake, you're still not satisfied. So you want another piece, and so you can't win. It's like a no-win situation. So the point is the senses is one thing, but then the mental consciousness is the other. So this is the point. I remember this girl watching on the video one time, those films on the television about people who are like obese and things. They have different things and people habits, you know. And there's one little girl, she's like 400 pounds, 500 pounds. A little girl, you can tell she was little. She died, she couldn't survive, you know. And her mother, she was obese from eating. And her mother said, oh, she's always been like that. She never felt full. Well, you know, with food, we eat till we're full, don't we? That's when, since a little girl, I've been attached to food. And so I'd eat, the only time I'd stop eating is when I was stuffed. Are you communicating, people? The only time I stopped was when my stomach physically was stuffed. So food became revolting. Until food became revolting, then I'd keep eating until it became revolting and you couldn't eat more, isn't it? And then we equate that with satisfaction. Do you see what I'm saying? But satisfaction is not sensory. That's the point. Satisfaction is a mental state. And that means you've got to cultivate it. So we've got to train our mind to be satisfied. As Lama says, you've got to learn to be content. That sounds hilarious to us because we think contentment comes from the boy, the handbag, the cake, the thing we see, eat, taste, touch, and smell. No, you'll never get satisfaction. This is not moralistic. It's practical. You get full. This girl, she said she was on Tinder, you know, She'd get boys from Tinder. I used to think I'd be wonderful to have Tinder when I was a kid. I had to work so hard to get boys. I had to pick them up on the street and go to jazz clubs. Now you just look in your thing and press a button. Anyway, she said it was so sad because she said she was just getting dressed from having sex with this boy, and she looks over on the bed and he's on Tinder getting the next girl. And this other boy who you go to Sex Anonymous, you know, because he's addicted to sex, not food or videos for that matter. And he said as he's having sex with the one girl, he's thinking of the next girl. That's the way attachment is. We all recognize this. It's the most painful, painful state of mind because we're never satisfied. You've got the best girl on the planet under you, and he's thinking of the next one. So you've got your mouthful of cake, and it's the most delicious because it's the first one, but you're already anticipating the second one. That's the nightmare of attachment. We can never be satisfied with what we've got this second. Or no matter what we've got this second, we are anticipating the next one. And it's just a habit, people. It's just a habit. It's a terrible habit. But the tragedy is satisfaction cannot come from senses. This is the part that's so simple. It's just brilliant psychology. But don't hear it as religion. So how do you get satisfaction? You've got to practice being satisfied. How? By faking it till you make it. I mean, that's the point that I find so astonishing. We know when you first start to play the piano, you're a complete disaster, right? You've learned the theories and you can't even put two fingers on the piano. You don't say, oh, I can't play piano, it's not possible. We know that you train your mind and you can learn to develop the habit to play the piano. So we're very persevering. But when it comes to having happy thoughts, we don't know such a thing exists. Are you hearing what I'm saying? So learning to be a happy person is training your mind to think like that. Just like learning to be a musician is training your mind to know the theories and then to put your hands on the piano. And you keep practicing and keep practicing. We are geniuses at this in the world, but not when it comes to being a happy person or a suffering person, because we don't think it's got to do with our mind. We think it's my husband's fault and his fault and her job to make me happy. I mean, we're completely schizophrenic. I'm not being sarcastic. The satisfaction comes from training yourself to have discipline and leave your hands in your lap, even when the attachment's so gigantic, hungering for a fourth piece, because the habit. You know it won't bring you satisfaction. Or it'll give you a stuffed stomach. So you train yourself. And this is the most hard job. I get to 80. I'm 80 this year and I'm still struggling with it, you know? Because that's how deep attachment is. And then our tragedy in our culture, when I heard Oprah talk, I love Oprah, but I was shocked at her ignorance. She didn't even recognize a thing called attachment. Because we just assume you can't stop the chatter. We assume you can't change your mind. Do you see what I'm saying? It's really shocking. Another fellow in the Wall Street Journal, I read all these papers on my iPad, writing all about his experiences of losing weight and the struggle with attachment. But they don't use that word. Just call it chatter in the head and assume that you can't change it. We assume you can't change your thoughts. We know we can change our thoughts when it comes to learning math and music. And you squeeze your brain to learn new thoughts. We don't realize it when it comes to being a happy person. Are you communicating with me? It's very shocking. But we can learn to be content by training your thoughts. But you've got to practice, and it's very hard. It's like people know you can do it. People who go to AA, they've done that. They've stopped drinking the alcohol and they've learned to be content. You know, you learn to not buy into it. So powerful. So happiness, satisfaction can't come from sensory experiences. Happiness has to come from mental. Changing the mind, lessening the hunger, lessening the attachment, lessening the anger, lessening the jealousy, lessening the low self-esteem, consciously doing it. It's not just cross your fingers and hope for the best. And it's grabbing these emotions before they get to the body and become emotional. Then it's too late. Damage control at 100 miles an hour with the wheels falling off. Not much you can do. This is being a Buddhist, all right? That's how you be a Buddhist. Who would have thought? Any questions? Any questions there? No questions? Any questions, anybody? What time is it? 8:15, 8:30. Any questions? Eileen, you can guarantee Eileen will start the questions going. I love your questions, Eileen. Go on, darling.
Oh, thank you. If we see, excuse me, I'm sorry. If we see, for instance, in our mental continuum that we're obsessing about something, or, you know, that we're chewing on something, that there's this attachment mentally. So And it's very painful when that happens because it's hard to stop sometimes.
That's right, precisely.
So I take it that the only thing that would work is to sit with it, to sit for 5 minutes. I'm trying to.
What do you mean by sit with it, Eileen? Give us an
Well-
example of a drama in your head. Give us a little example. Which particular delusion? Anger, jealousy, attachment? Which story is it?
Anger, attachment,
Anger.
let's say anger. Let's do anger. That's always a good one. Yes.
Give one.
Yes.
Give an
So
example.
it's a story in my head, let's
About
say.
this one. Give an
I
example.
un-
Attachment,
And I
jealousy.
understand I'm creating a story.
No, Eileen, I need you to be very precise. Which delusion is the one rampant in your head? Is it attachment? Is it anger? Is it jealousy? Is it anxiety? Which one is it?
Anger
You mean you're
slash
mad with
resentment.
somebody. So stop,
Yes.
angry with somebody.
Yes,
Is that what you're talking? And you're chatting in your head about the person.
that's right.
That's right. So good. Now we know what you're talking about. So now what's the point about this?
So the antidote, I'm just trying to, we get in these states. I mean, I can see it and I understand that I'm going with it. And it makes me very unhappy because that's
what's
what
the
it
question?
does. So I guess the only antidote would be to sit in meditation.
No, keep it more simple. Don't say sit in meditation. No, it's just keep it simple. Keep it simple, Eileen. If you're sitting there thinking, Mary, my sister, how dare she say that to me? It's not how it was. I didn't do that. And she said this. And why does she always do this? And she said
Yeah.
this. And it's just not fair. And he said that. That's how anger talks. Is that right?
Yes, surely.
That's a bunch of
Absolutely.
thoughts. Would you agree it's a bunch of thoughts?
Yes, absolutely.
Thoughts
Yes,
and concepts, right?
yes,
So you
absolutely.
first have to have another part, bring up, instead of being involved in all the drama, you try to step back a bit. You can't stop them sometimes, but you have to bring up you have to consciously, actively bring up positive thoughts. You've got to bring up your wisdom. Instead of Eileen, little rampant, crazy Eileen, 100% being angry, you have to remember wisdom. Okay, Eileen, give yourself a break. This is part of my mind is called anger. But here, so what do I want to try and do? So you argue, you get your virtuous states of mind. You don't just sit with it. That's meaningless. You have to consciously do something about by arguing with those thoughts, Eileen. So tell me
Yes.
an argument. Do a little story for us. What would you say to anger?
Well, that I'm over exaggerating,
That's
that it's tapping into something deeper, maybe that has nothing to do with.
No, that's too complicated.
That's too complicated.
If you wrote down those angry thoughts, you'd have a
Yes.
page full of conceptual things, would you not?
There's no
So then
question.
you have to conjure up positive concepts to argue with them. It's so simple. You're making it more complicated, Eileen. You have to argue with those thoughts. So what would you
Yes.
say to anger? What were the positive thoughts you would say to anger?
Well, you mean about the situation or just in general, which would be to focus on something positive and
I'm
not feed.
saying that, Eileen. No.
Right.
It's more simple when you're talking. It's far more simple. You've got a story in your head about your sister. Let's pretend.
Yeah, it's not my
You would-
sister, but yeah, okay, yeah.
Let's just pretend it's your sister.
Yes,
And
okay,
you're saying she this and she that and how dare this and it's not fair. So then you've got to do an analysis of it. So how would you step back and how would you talk to yourself using your wise thoughts and your virtuous thoughts and your kind thoughts? And how would you argue? How would you be your own therapist in that?
well, to also to tap into what's positive about that person also.
Okay,
the
so one
positive
example
feelings
would
I
be-
have.
Okay, stop. So one way you would argue with those angry, upset thoughts would
Yes,
be you say, what would you say to yourself? I mean, this is exactly what I'm talking about. So
Yes, I
say some
know.
words. What would you say to yourself?
well, I'd say it's not always that way. And there's so many good qualities about this person.
So you try
And it's my own issue, the way I'm responding also.
okay. So what you just said is a series of things. You've made many suggestions for different arguments you would use to counteract anger's story.
Yes.
This is the job we have to do, and we do it already. We kind of just don't notice. So this is the key job we have to do. And the sooner you catch the angry thoughts before
Yes.
they become so entrenched and emotional, the better it is, because then you can nip it in the bud.
Yes.
That's the problem. We just let them go uncontrolled. We assume we can't change them. And the tragedy is and basically those angry thoughts are a conceptual story. They're a script that you are writing about your sister and the situation, and we believe it is absolutely the truth. That's the big problem. So one of the approaches would be, well, it's exaggerating, Eileen. Don't exaggerate, you know. Another one would be, well, you know, it's all, as you said, it's impermanent, it'll change. Another one would be, well, she's not always like this, I know that, and give it a break. I mean, you've got to have a multitude of stories of antidotes according to where you're at with it. That's how you become a content person. You've got to be in charge of all your thoughts. That's the job to be done, Eileen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sometimes you tell yourself to shut up before it's too strong, give it a break and be quiet. You have some discipline, you know. Other times you've got to think it through. Other times you like you see, just sit with it and watch it, but you don't allow it to cook and go bigger and bigger, you know. Do you understand?
Absolutely. Yes, oh, I do.
Multitude of approaches, but it's very simple. Very simple. We make it complicated. This is what daily practice is.
Yes.
Or like with the cake. You're hungry, you know, the habit of stuffing the cake in, the habit of attachment to food is so strong, isn't it? I might not be with you, but certainly with me is. So you see the cake or whatever, and you start to eat it, especially if you haven't had any for a while, your stomach's empty, so you're hungry as well as the attachment. So then suddenly you're stuffing it in. So you have to have some awareness of noticing it and analyzing the attachment and saying how absurd. And you can have some, eat it more slowly, enjoy it, and then stop. You decide, your hand won't go, your hand will keep going to the cake until your mental consciousness tells you to stop. So you mentally say, it's enough. So of course the anxiety is very strong because you want more cake, but you don't believe in attachment story. That's how you don't believe in it. And you say, it's okay. And then if you practice it every day, it takes time, you are developing satisfaction and you're developing the discipline, not just follow every tiny baby thought that your crazy mind has. It's hard work, but this is what's possible.
Yes. Thank you.
This is being a Buddhist. Do you understand?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Thank you. What else, people? That's right. Joe, yes, we know.
So recently I have an argument with a friend. Right?
Say it again, what?
We have an argument with a friend.
Okay, good, with a friend. Send yourself with a friend.
We argue over selective compassion.
You argue over what?
Selective compassion.
What does that mean, darling?
That means like we talk about this all the time, right? We talk about politics. Like we agree that we support Ukraine.
You what, darling?
We support Ukraine over Russia during the war.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have compassion to Ukrainian people.
Yeah, okay, we have a compassion for a certain group of people, right? Then.
Yeah, but recently there's a war, there's conflict in Israel and Gaza. So I was like, but he like, no, he's not support Palestinian people. I'm like, why not? It's the people too, but we talk over it. So I feel like he has like different biases.
Your friend, you mean
yes,
your friend has different biases. Yes, we all got biases.
So
yeah.
Sure, I feel angry toward it.
Do you what?
Sure, I feel angry toward it.
Angry to your friend?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you mean by angry, you mean what? Shouting at him and saying he's wrong and that kind of thing, and disagreeing with him, or what do you mean?
Yeah, because he was like, we really stopped talking ever since. Like we got into like a conflict. Like we talk over it, and I feel like he's really only supporting some people because he lied them, or you know, when you feel compassionate towards someone, but then to another group of people.
I know, see, our problem is at the moment, because we have our own, you see, when we understand attachment and aversion, these two states of mind that seem almost very simple, but they really pervade our minds. So attachment over its key the Buddhist analysis is the key function of all the neurotic states of mind. One of their key functions is they exaggerate certain aspects of the person or the event or whatever it is. So when there's attachment to a certain group, if I'm attached to the Palestinians, for example, let's say they're my people, I'm attached to the Palestinians, so I see everything from the Palestinian point of view. So therefore, I see the Israelis as
Oh, Daniel, you said that later, funny.
there's attachment and there's
You said
anger.
that later.
They
Thank
completely go
you.
together. So the more
I'll check
I
on the
attach-
Lysol in a few minutes.
Who's talking? I don't know, nobody. It's just reverberation of your and my voice, I think. So if I've got attachment to one group, when my attachment prefers that group, Therefore, I only see the good things, and therefore I want them to be happy. And then the more the other group does bad things to them, the more I have anger towards the other group. So attachment exaggerates the good qualities of my group, and aversion exaggerates the ugly qualities of the other group. Well, look at the world. This is exactly how we all are. So, of course, you know, there can still be objective reality that that group is really doing terrible things to this group. That can still be fact. But anger and attachment are on top of that. So if we're trying to be reasonable, we have to just have compassion for both groups and realize they're both harming themselves and each other. And there's still some injustices. And if we can do things to stop the injustice, great. But to try and keep attachment and aversion out of it is very difficult because it blinds us. We can't see the truth, you know? Are we communicating?
Yeah.
Or not?
But I mean, like, how can I overcome that kind of like, I always hope that we can be smart.
Okay. When we have, so clearly what's the analysis for you is you've got attachment to your position.
Yeah.
So then you try to convince him that you're right.
Yeah.
Don't. Won't get anywhere. Because part of the problem, we've got a position, well, I like that football team. You know, people are really fanatic about something. They want everybody to agree with them. And they can't stand to hear anything else. So to try and convince other people, that's because of attachment. So just love your friend for who he is, let him say exactly what he wants, and know it's his opinion and it doesn't affect your opinion at all. We don't want to hear other people's opinions when we have attachment. That's our problem.
Yeah.
So just, if he's your friend, value the friendship more than your
Just
opinion.
ignore.
Just let him talk what he wants. Let him say what he wants. But you say he's your friend, right?
Yeah.
You do love him, and he's a friend.
It's still my friend, but we stop talking.
Well, then just don't go there. That's right. If he wants to say it, let him say it. That's what's hard. Because if we want to try and convince another person, it's because we've got attachment. Even if you're right, it's very hard. So it's really hard to let people say things that we don't agree with. That's why people fight. But if you've got to value, if you decide you value your friendship,
How can Buddha enlighten people who has
what, darling?
What did Buddha did do? Buddha.
Well, I'm telling you what Buddha, I'm just quoting you Buddhist teachings in my words.
Okay.
I'm giving you the Buddha's view.
So we're not gonna change people.
I mean, you can, but maybe different methods, maybe by example. If people are rational and want to talk about facts, you can see both sides of the story. But if you try and convince people what for, you know, why, just to get them to agree with us. You might even be right. But we have to look at why do you want to convince them? So why do you want him to agree with you? Why? Look at that. Why?
Because I know I'm right.
There you go. But I want everybody else to agree with this. That's our problem. That's the thing of attachment. Attachment is very like a fragile baby that wants everything to be nice. And we want everybody to be what we want. That's the suffering of attachment, darling. It's very painful. You understand? Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Thank you.
Good, darling. Good.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on, so I am, just for context, I'm a psychotherapist. I work with a lot of couples.
Okay, very good, yes.
I also have OCD, I've had my whole life. Everything you've been saying has been so fascinating. I'm really curious about what you were saying to the first person who asked, this idea of sort of like arguing,
yes.
Constructive argument with
yes.
your angry clients.
Yes.
Something that I find very helpful, and I'm curious how it fits in, is the idea of actually almost the opposite, being practicing compassion towards the anger or practicing compassion towards the jealousy.
In yourself, you mean?
Yes,
no, absolutely.
exactly.
Okay, yeah.
Being sort of the wise
That's right.
witness.
No, it's a really good. See, I think that the tragedy is, isn't it? We can see when we are jealous and angry and depressed and anxious, it's totally self-miserable. It's utterly like we're abusing ourselves, really. And our problem is, as soon as we hear that you've got to argue with it, we think we've got to beat it up and hate ourselves. And that's our common response. Oh, I'm angry. Oh, I'm this. Oh, I'm jealous. I shouldn't be. But that's the part that's really, really hard to get to, because we have such. And see, the irony is, I think, the way certainly the Buddhist analysis, I don't even see it. The irony, for the Buddha, attachment and anger, all these very constricted, painful, fear-based, they are that's what ego is. Ego's not some big fat thing. That's ego is constricted and miserable and distorted. And it's naturally self-loathing. They're all naturally the symptom of an unhappy person. By definition, you're miserable if you're caught up in those. Do you understand me? So therefore, we've got to have the ability to see how that's causing us pain, no matter what the other person did. And that takes time, because it's real the other person harmed us. So to get beyond that, to see what's going on in here is very painful. But then to have the analysis based on kindness, and that's really tough. Most people like doing this job, we love to hate ourselves, you know. It's really hard to do it with a genuine wish to see how it's causing me pain. And that's what's hard, because the irony of ego is that we loathe ourselves somehow.
It's like that second arrow thing, right?
What, darling?
You're feeling anger and shame, but then you are angry at yourself.
Yeah,
and
precisely.
shame.
That's exactly what we do.
Feeling
They're angry because you're
shame.
angry, and jealous, and angry because you're jealous, and we just keep multiplying. That's the tragedy. So to get to the point where we can own that this stuff's causing me pain, and I'm sick of pain, and then to have the to be tough love for yourself. That's really hard to get to that one, isn't it? You must see being a therapist. It's so hard to get us to this one,
Yeah.
because we're addicted to the. I know ourselves, darling. That's the point. We're addicted to the misery of it, you know, and we love to think we're bad. And this is a terrible tragedy. You see, there's one of the. Okay, let's look at this one. What is analysis of this? Attachment to the object of the senses is fairly obvious, you know. Emotional hunger, never being satisfied. But the deepest attachment is attachment to being approved of, being seen as a good girl, and therefore, and that since we're born is driving us from the Buddha. So even, especially the good girl syndrome, when you're really a good girl, mummy's helper, you are kind, you are loving, you are generous, they're all good, but they're driven by this craving to be seen as a good girl. So then when we adjust all our behavior to adjust to a person to make sure they smile back at us, then we end up being completely inauthentic. So in a way, it's a symptom of a person who doesn't like ourselves, because we have to analyze what is it? Why do I need someone to say I'm a nice person? What is it about me that I can't say? And that's our problem. The irony of ego is we're like a nothing person. So it's very weird. I mean, I use schizophrenic loosely, but it's like that. You understand what I'm saying? So to be able to get finally the last attachment to go, they say, they use the story of the yogi up in the mountains who's given up all the attachments, but he's still thinking in his head about what the people in the village are thinking about him. This is the most primordial and the final symptom of a half a person, you know. What is it? I mean, why do you think we're lonely? Because I've got no one to share my thoughts with. So what's wrong with my thoughts that I have to share them with someone else? Why can't I be happy with them? It's it's too shocking to ask the question, isn't it? You understand? This is the worst, the deepest attachment. I mean, the Buddha's saying, the baseline for normal in Buddha is perfection, is goodness, clarity, wisdom, joy, self-confidence. And until then, we're like broken people, you know, isn't it? So this is intense, because it's good. You can look at the external circumstances that can help us know about our mind. But the bottom line is finally got to look at the mind, isn't it? Get past blaming your mum and dad and everybody else. Finally, to get inside. Finally, and often we never get there. You must see that with clients, isn't it?
Thank you.
So intense. Wow. That's why I always talk about my friends in prison. I can't help but talk about this woman. I always mention her. Sunny, in prison for 17 years in Florida, 70s, hitching with a husband. There's a nice Jewish girl, has no religion or anything, got 2 kids or something, and hitching in Florida, get picked up by 2 guys, and they got stopped by the police, and the 2 guys killed the police, and then Sunny and her husband are accused of murder and put on death row. And husband even get executed. She goes to the execution, his head bursts into flames. She loses her children because her mother and father died in a car accident. It's just like one nightmare after another. And this woman, I always find, she's an astonishing example. She's not a Buddhist, she's not a Christian, she's not anything. She just had this incredible emotional intelligence. She's in a cell day after day, year after year, with a Bible. That's all they gave her. It's like so arcane, so medieval, innocent. And somehow she said, at some point, I finally realized I couldn't change anything, that they couldn't take my mind from me. So she basically worked on her own mind for years, being her own, just learn yoga, learn to literally reconfigure her thoughts. So she'd give herself permission for 5 minutes to be raging angry, and then she would stop, go back to her work. I mean, that is so astonishing. Do you understand? To have a person on their own come up with this incredible view that she knew that she could learn to be happy by changing her mind. I mean, I find it so outrageous, isn't it? And I find her such a good example because she's not a Buddhist or anything. She just had this intelligence. She's the proof of the pudding for me, you know. But how hard to get to that one. Oh my God. I remember at the same time reading about this other guy who was on death row, also innocent. And this is a very common story in prisons, working with people in prison is, you know, and I see with prisons, they mostly crush people emotionally because you can't raise your voice in a prison. You just get chucked into, you know, it's impossible. So you become completely suppressed. And the people I met out of prison, you can feel that mostly emotionally broken, you know. But this other guy, I remember reading about this other guy who was innocent, also on death row, who lost his mind, is what we'd call normal. Completely raging. As long as he had a voice, he'd be screaming, I did not rape and kill that woman. I did not rape and kill that woman. And that's what we call normal. And if you'd gone to him and said, well, you know, you could change your mind, he would, I mean, it would be so far from reality. Even all of us, most of us who don't have that, can't see how we can change our mind. Because we're so addicted to the outside. It's very intense. So you have some good clients, you look at their minds.
Oh, yes, I love my work,
You do.
but I'm also there.
Yourself. No, precisely, darling. No, exactly. Precisely.
Constant.
We're all the same.
Yeah.
And that's why, to the degree that you can do the work is the degree which you can help others. That's the point. It's so clear. And that's what I think is amazing these days. I mean, 60 years ago, when you had all these white men become psychiatrists who would never deign to think they were imperfect and just sort of talked about the brain and looked down at these pathetic people and gave them a pill. At least today, there's these amazing good systems of therapy and counseling, and people know they've got to do the job themselves first, which is wonderful.
Still a lot of God complex.
It's still like that a bit.
A lot of God complex.
Oh, is it really?
Therapists.
I suppose
there are
it
therapists
is.
who don't do the work.
That's, well, you can't help about it. If you don't do the work, it's like trying to be teach people cooking and you don't cook. It's not possible.
Yeah.
It's just all theory, isn't it? That's horrible. Oh, that's awful. Wow. What else, people? Anybody something to say? Anyone?
I was thinking about,
Go on.
this probably sounds, well, it doesn't matter what
Say
it says. Judgment and judgmental. And I kept thinking, I'm a way of intellectualizing it. There's judgmental over here, and then there's judgment, and it's one coin, but there's two sides.
Tell me about that. What do you mean?
Well, I always feel like judgment has kept me alive and saved me.
Oh, you mean intelligent assessing this and that?
Yes,
That's
exactly.
completely intelligent. Like, in other words, there is a war in Ukraine. It's not being judgmental saying there's a war. That's called intelligent judgment. And then you're going to see what you can do about it. Or you're, you know, that's a big difference. Yes, exactly.
Well, that's what I call it.
That's
what
good.
I'm doing. But then I wonder, am I judgmental? Am I keeping people away?
Well, I know, well, the
reasons.
judgmental, I'd say that using the Buddhist view, the judgmental would be coming out of attachment or anger, or one of the neuroses. If it's a valid assessment of a reality, the person out over there is being punched in the nose, that's just called intelligence.
Yeah.
But giving up anger doesn't mean they're not punching in the nose. Anger is a thing on top and says, how dare that person punch? And you get all emotional. So the hard part in our culture is to think that you can not have anger and not have attachment, because then we think you just become a non-person. So we've got to be distinguishing between clear, wise, virtuous assessment and neurotic, distorted, I-based assessments.
Right.
Because the judgmental ones would be I-based, coming from our own perspective, you know, neurotic. Does and
Well, I'm looking at attachment.
that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Now
There you
I'm
go.
getting
There you go.
the attachment.
There you
Yeah,
go.
yeah, I'm getting that.
Yep. And that's hard to see the difference.
Yeah, thank you, because.
Very hard. Because when we hear you've got to give up attachment, we think we've got to chuck the baby out the bathwater
Mhm,
and become nothing. You know, no. You
right.
give up anger, you're sort of saying, oh well, there's no war out there, it's just pretend, it's not all anger. No, it's rubbish. You give up, it's extreme. No, not like that. So it takes time.
That has helped me.
Oh. I think that'll do us, won't it? Doesn't matter what the clock says. Oh yeah, here, Paola, talk to me, sweetheart. Paola, you're in the middle of the night for you, darling. What are you doing at this time of night? It's 2 in the morning usually. Come on, talk to me.
Three in the morning.
Yeah, 3 in the morning. Oh God. Go on, talk to me, sweetheart.
So please apologize. Thank you very much for your teachings, for taking refuge. Thank you for everything, and please apologize if I might have missed something. But I just wanted to be sure about what I'm about my conclusions.
done.
You said before we don't want to hear other people's opinion when we have attachment, and also when we want to convince someone about our ideas, our opinions. That's also attachment. Because you were replying to that man who talked about the argument he had with his friend. So in this case, what do? We just don't do anything. We just, what shall we do in
I
this
understand,
case?
Paula. So I understand. No, this
Because
doesn't mean,
I have the same
I understand
problem.
that. It doesn't mean giving up. Okay,
And I don't want to hurt anybody.
I understand that, darling. It doesn't mean we can't have discussions about something. I mean, that's absurd to think we can't even have discussion. We can talk about football, we can talk about the weather, we can talk about politics, we can say this and that, but as soon as we see in our own mind, his point was, and it's true, usually we have a position. Everybody who reads about the war in Ukraine, it seems to me, you're going to have a position. You either prefer the Russians or you prefer the Ukrainians. It's not always, but it's commonly like that. So something like Israel, there always seems to be a lot of emotion. You either agree with Israel or you agree with, with the Palestinians. It tends to be like that. So in any position, which is called, we call it politics, but it's just called human suffering. Then it's two people who have football teams. There's always going to be emotion around those football teams. You got attached to this group, and therefore you have aversion to that group. So when it's that kind of situation, you just have to be very careful, because there's no point in trying to convince people. There's no benefit in having political arguments, because that for sure is coming from attachment and aversion. So if you can have a view when you think about Palestine, see that from both sides there's going to be problems, and maybe one group does more bad than the other group, but they both hate each other, and there's suffering on both sides. That seems to me, at least you have to have that position. There's no benefit to me having any other position. I can't see the benefit, because it's always going to be full of attachment. We can't help but if we like a certain group or a certain football team or a certain music, it's always going to be mixed with attachment, which means we then have aversion when we hear people who don't like what we are attached to. So we just have to watch our mind, Paula, and see what the situation is. You have to be intelligent. Are we communicating?
Yes, sharp like a hawk, to have the
What's
sight,
that?
right? You said once you need to have the sight sharp like a hawk.
The what?
Sharp like a hawk.
That's right, watching our mind like a hawk.
Watch.
And as soon as you hear somebody talking, and you can hear their emotion, those Palestinians this, those Israelis that, as soon as you hear them talk this way, you go, ha, don't discuss it, and just leave it there. There's no benefit. We can tell when people have emotion, which means attachment. If it's coming from love and compassion, that's different. Or, the position with the China and Tibet. I mean, people, as soon as there's attachment involved, then we get distorted. So we have to just watch our mind, that's all, and know when to speak and when not. Do you understand, darling?
Yes, thank you very much.
Good, sweetheart. So I think we finish. We think, okay, if there's any benefit in all these words I've been saying and your few questions, I didn't give you much chance today. We keep moving, keep looking at our mind, and keep knowing that we are the beneficiary of this work, and on the basis of this, we can then help other people. That's the job. You've got to help yourself first, then you can help others. That's the idea. So we think like that. And then we keep moving, one step at a time. Who is that there? Who is that? I can't see your name in California. Who are you? What's your name there?
My name's Allison. My name is Allison in San Diego.
There it is, Allison. I couldn't see your name was all mixed together. Now I see it. I see it. Good, Allison. I'm happy to see you, sweetheart.
Good to see you, Venerable. Good to see you.
Good, darling. Thank you. So we'll sing a little prayer. May compassion grow and grow in the hearts of all. Jamchod, Sentog, Rinpoche, Make, Panam, Ke Yuchi, Ke Panyam, Pame Payam, Gomne, Gondu, Velbashog. That's all, everybody. Keep moving. Never give up, never give up, never give up, and keep seeing our mind And then we can see other people as well. Okay? Thank you, people. Thank you, sweethearts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sunny. Thank you.